I'm ready for all today, through all the pain, all the way, the fight for all, my life, the love, we taking it all the way,
Fries in the bottom of your fast food basket. Getting called honey by the old lady at the supermarket, and waking up in the morning and then noticing there's about 2 hours left till your alarm comes off. Those are all phenomenal feelings in the world. But let me tell you, there is nothing quite like finding a gem in the later rounds of your fantasy football draft, I should say. I mean, there's nothing better than that. And let me tell you, in this episode, we're going to be talking about a lot of later round players that you're going to be targeting in those later stages of your fantasy redraft, because usually we try to tell you guys, hey, the early rounds, those are the fundamental pieces. You want those infrastructures, the consistent components in your lineups, but the championships, the playoff winners, they're going to be found in the later parts of the draft. It's no coincidence. Puka Nacua was one of the highest championship winning player on the roster. It's no coincidence. He was up there. He was killing it. And it's no coincidence that also Raheem Mostert was also up there as one of the higher championship winning players on those rosters. But of course, we got a couple legendary guests on this episode. Of course, I'm going to let you guys do the introductory because I'm terrible at it. I'm not even going to give it a shot. But first, we got Tip. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Tippmajor. Glad to be on here with you, Nader. But I'm even more excited to have JJ Zachariason in here.
Oh, all right.
And I mean, guys, people that are tuning into this is huge. This is phenomenal. This is gigantor. You can just go with any adjective. But JJ Zachariason, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. You take the floor, my man. You got it.
I appreciate the intro, man. That's too kind. Yeah, I'm JJ. I do stuff over at Late Round Fantasy Football. It's my own company, own brand, doing my own thing, doing my podcast, draft guide, all that good stuff. I'm very, very lucky to be able to wear gym shorts every day, for a living. It's a beautiful thing.
How do you pronounce your last name?
Zachariason.
See,
yeah,
that's
Tip
why
got it right, man. He crushed it.
I would have never attempted that in a million years. A lot of the longtime listeners know there's nothing worse than me trying to pronounce somebody's last name more specifically.
Yeah.
I'm still practicing on Ben Skrowanik.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, I'm still practicing that one.
Yeah.
I almost got it though. But in this episode, of course, like we talked about, we are going to be talking about those late round draft picks. That's going to be the main topic of this episode. But first, I got to have fun with you guys. Training camp hype.
Yes.
I mean, the ridiculous articles, comments, tweets that we hear on the daily basis now, to the point where, after the heat wave that we'd had, if somebody hydrates properly, then I'm probably going to move them up on my draft board. But I don't know how you guys feel about these training camp hypes. Is this just a nothing burger, Mr. Hold on, I'm going to try it. Zachariason.
Yeah, close enough. Zachariason. Yeah,
Zachariason.
Honestly, I get more Zachariason, so that was
Zachariason.
Yeah.
They get biblical on you, I guess, sir.
Yeah, right. So yeah, you're asking how much we should lean into the hype trains that are out there.
Correct.
I think it depends. Like I do think that some hype trains, if you will, end up being warranted. If you're reading the right beat reporters, if you're looking at like the proper context for what's being said. Like last year, for instance, Jordan Rodriguez from The Athletic absolutely crushed it with her Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams takes. Like she was one of the main reasons in my draft guide last year. Unfortunately, I didn't say draft Kyron Williams, but I said avoid Cam Akers. That was, at least like halfway there, right? But it was largely because, aside from the fact that he was like a dead zone back and such, but it was largely because Jordan was talking about how the Rams really liked Kyron Williams. He was getting a lot more reps with the first team than people realized in camp. last summer. And, it could have gone in that direction. Did we know that Kyron was going to have the standalone value that he had? Of course not. I don't even think she knew that. I don't even think the Rams necessarily knew that. But it's all about, I always tell people that fantasy football is all about liking a player just a little bit more than the rest of your league. You don't have to go out there and predict that Kyron Williams is going to be an RB1. You just have to go out there and say, I like Kyron Williams a little bit more than the 11 other players and the other 11 other league managers that are out there. Now, I will say that when beat reporters are talking about like talent evaluation and they're doing, they're giving their own opinion on things and, it's not coming from like the coach's mouth. I think that's a little bit different. But if we're talking playing time and how they're being used in practice and in camp, and then obviously we get to see what goes on in the preseason, I think that usage kind of stuff does matter to some degree.
What about you, Tip? What do you think?
Yeah, one of our great friends here, Bob Harris, I've had the pleasure of talking to Bob Harris a lot. And one of the very first things that I talked to Bob Harris about was coach speak. He is famous and known for coach speak. It's something that we hear all the time in the NFL or in any sport, but especially in the NFL, because that's what we're talking about. In their press conferences, they come out there and say, oh, this guy's in the greatest shape of their life, or, they've really made a transformation or things like that. And I look at, training camp has just started up. It started up a couple days ago. But today they had a lot of teams go back to training camp. And one of the teams that went back was Green Bay. And the Green Bay Packers head coach, Matt LaFleur, said that A.J. Dillon is in the greatest shape of his life. I was so enamored by that comment that I went ahead and tweeted it out and got people's thoughts on it, because they went and got Josh Jacobs this past offseason. And now you got a guy in A.J. Dillon, who I don't think he's ever really been in bad shape. He's just a big, thick guy, and especially, the bottom portion of it with his tree trunk sized legs. He's just a big guy. And so that raised my eyebrows a little bit. So I am curious to see now training camp, how he looks, preseason, how he looks, because they're going to be able to get him an opportunity to play. So the coach speak, that has always been something that I've enjoyed listening to. It's always a little comical. Sometimes you get coaches that'll say outlandish things, and sometimes they're actually telling you something that you should listen to.
See, the correct term isn't he's a big dude. It's he's a girthy dude.
Yeah, now look, there's certain thick words. There's certain words. I think it's cool. Girthy, I'm not going to use that. Not going that route.
So I don't know if you guys remember. I stopped listening personally to hype trains after there was one player. I'm trying to remember his name off the top of my head.
Amir Abdullah.
Well, him definitely. He's always had one. On the Chiefs,
crazy one in Detroit.
Yes, yeah, I remember that one. Darwin Thompson, that's his name. After his hype train, and that one crashed and burned pretty severely, would be probably the polite way to say it.
Yeah,
I stopped listening to hype trains after that.
I think that the key though is that, like, if there's like Darwin Thompson, for instance, like there was nothing really suggesting that he was a good player. Like there was nothing with his draft capital, his collegiate profile, all that kind of stuff that was like, this is obviously a good player. Whereas I know that we're talking in hindsight a little bit here, but like Puka Nacua, for instance, like he was someone who actually had a reasonable collegiate profile, had a really, really good yards per route run rate. For whatever reason, BYU just didn't use him that much. From a routes perspective, it's kind of like what we saw with Ladd McConkey in Georgia this past year. But if there's something that you can latch onto from a talent perspective and you can combine that with the hype train, I think that matters. But then when it's like some random guy who doesn't really have like the backing and the actions of the team backing him, with good draft capital or with a good contract, et cetera, it's like, why would we expect that player to really go ham this year?
Then what's the point of the hype train?
To get us to talk, to build content. I love Jim Rome, and Jim Rome is all about team content, and that's what we should be all about. I mean, we all are in the content business. That's what it is. It's about getting us to get on a show together or tweet it out right before we go to bed or whatever it may be. It's all about team content.
So before we move on, do you guys have a hype train that you're currently on?
Go, JJ.
Give me one. Come on.
I mean, would we consider like Dontavian Wicks a hype train right now? I'd I'd say I'm kind of on that hype train, but
All
I
right,
don't
all
know.
right.
I feel like the hype trains really start in August. Like once preseason games start going and stuff, and people start seeing these guys, that's when we see like sincere ADP jumps. I'm talking like 2 or 3 round jumps, as opposed to like, Wicks as a 12th rounder becoming an 11th rounder or something.
Yeah.
I'm
Tippy,
gonna
go on.
I'm gonna be super safe on this one. I'm not gonna go Dontavia Wicks, although I do like it. I'm gonna be super safe. I've been watching the tape. Everything that is happening in Atlanta for Bijan Robinson is just the stars are aligning properly. I mean, you bring in Zach Robinson this offseason, you got one of the best offensive lines in the league. You bring in a better quarterback in Kirk Cousins, although he's dealing with the Achilles injury. I know he's on the field, but he's not playing football against another, team. So I think that when we start this season, Bijan is going to be heavily running or utilized in this team, along with Tyler Algier. But I think that Bijan is just that much more talented. So I'm all on the hype train of Bijan Robinson right now, man.
Yes.
And him going in like the middle to later part of the first round, I think is a huge thing. I think by the time August is around, like JJ was just talking about, I think you're gonna see his ADP jump up to the top 5-ish. I think it'll definitely get up in that area.
Mm-hmm. Now, real quick, right before we dabble into some draft strategies, I always like to try to sprinkle a little draft strategy in each episode to get people's minds thinking. Christian McCaffrey, he's 101, right? I always ask people this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, consensus, yes. Yeah.
I
have him 101, but I can make arguments for a lot of guys.
Yeah. Bijan. I'm all on Bijan.
Nope. I'm invalidating that statement. CMC, he's 101. All right. So real quick, right before we talk into the late round draft gems, draft strategies, and I always actually this topic came up because me and a buddy, we were talking about bye weeks, and we were talking about how we try to spread apart our bye weeks if we're kind of stuck in between a player or two. Say, for example, last year, I think I was contemplating between, I think it was DK Metcalf and I think it was like Cooper Kupp or something like that. I don't remember the second player exactly, but I went DK Metcalf because my bye weeks were spread out that way. And that was realistically one of the only reasons why I did that. But I think in hindsight, that was incorrect because what I ended up doing by spreading out my bye weeks is that I always went into a specific week at a disadvantage. One of my elite players were always on a bye week. So I never felt like I had a strong roster to go against my opponent. He might have had a handful of players on a bad bye week. And then, you know what? He just got it over with from the beginning. If he lost, you know what? He assumed he was going to lose anyway. If he came up, threw a bunch of flyers on the ball on the starting roster and had a couple good games, you know what? Maybe he came out and stole a victory on me. And I feel like that's something I kind of look back on and say, you know what, maybe it is a good idea to kind of stack up the bye weeks on one specific week, have a hell week, and then just get it over with. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Mr. Zach, can you start it off with the thought process?
I would say that I think that when people start to overthink bye weeks and they become suboptimal as a result, it's bad, right? So if you're in the same tier, drafting between two guys, I don't know if there's necessarily a right answer. Like I've researched this a little bit, but I understand like you're taking a small hit, let's say week in and week out, as opposed to just taking a massive hit in 1 week. Yeah. Well, that small hit week in and week out, it's not that you have a 0% chance to win that week, right? And so you have maybe a 48% chance instead of a 55%, whatever it is, right? And so I don't think there's a clear cut answer. I think it's more so making sure that you're being optimal with your picks and you're not really working around those buys. The other thing I would say is be cognizant of how deep your bench is in terms of just roster spots in general. If you only have a 4-team bench, you don't want to stack buys like that because you're going to have a lineup in 1 week where you can't even fill it because you don't have enough roster spots to get guys off the waiver wire in order to do so, right? And so if you only have 4 guys on your bench or four spots on your bench, and you have 5 guys on bye, then all of a sudden one of those bye weeks is in your starting lineup and you're dropping defense and you're not able to play defense. In my opinion, you're always trying to score points every single week, because 99% of leagues have some sort, at the very least, some sort of tiebreaker for points scored. And that's still important, to some degree. So I think that's probably the biggest consideration for me, is how big the rosters actually are and how big the benches are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree. You definitely need to know what your size of your rosters are. But I used to be that person in drafts, and I would be counting who's on the bye weeks, and I would be like, oh my gosh, I got this bye week Armageddon or bye week hell coming up. But after I look at it, and I'm so happy that we're having this show talking about late round gems, because if you properly get late round gems, guys who may have good games or games that they're maybe playing a defense that is a subpar defense from the year prior, you can kind of take those bye weeks and turn it into something that can benefit you, and it gives your player an actual rest. It can be something that you can utilize. So I'm very, very happy that we're having this late round gems, as long as that late round gem doesn't have the same bye week, because that's something you have to consider as well. But I don't let it bother me, man. I don't let it bother me. Stacking has become more and more popular over the course of time that I've played fantasy football, and I love it, because who would want 14 points as opposed to just 7 points? If in some of my leagues it's 7 points for a touchdown, so I would rather take 14 points and double it up, and that just gives me a better opportunity.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say I'm a live by the stack, die by the stack type of guy. So I'm always gonna recommend a stack type of person. But yeah, I mean, it is an interesting way to go about constructing your team on a redraft, considering, oh, you know what, maybe it's a 2 wide receiver league. Oh, it's a 3 wide receiver league. I got to draft starters for those players before I start going to the other positions, and then all of a sudden you start thinking about the bench spots, and then your gems, and then trying to go for bye weeks. It's all fun stuff, and that's why, in my opinion, a redraft season is the best part of fantasy football. Starts and sits in the league, and the actual competitiveness. Of course, that's always tons of fun, but for me, it is the redraft process that I enjoy so much. Now, real quick, let's segue into the late round gems. Now, me personally, I think late rounds 8 and above that. Other people may, think, hey, that's too easy, and try to go like 10 and above, which we can. I have no issue with that. I got no issue with it, but I always try to mention this in episodes and try to remind people, if you look at your last year's draft and you look at probably round 6 and up, maybe you got one player on that roster from your draft to the end of the year. Maybe you do. You probably don't. I would say there's a 90% chance you probably don't. So I just want to make sure everybody realizes it's not that serious if you don't hit on these players. Of course, it's always nice when you do, but you know what? I just want to always make sure people realize, hey, you know what? You didn't lose your league because you didn't get any gems or any of that sorts. And make sure that, you know what? Hey, go for those flyers, because like I said, chances are they're probably not going to be on your roster. So even if you draft, I don't know, who is it? Jared Goff in the 11th round. Yeah, that might be great and all, but chances are on a bye week crunch, you might have to drop him for another player. I'd rather take a flyer in that case, unless I'm stacking it with Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's a different story. But all right, I'm going to give the floor to you guys. We're going to start off with Tip here. Who do you have as a late round gem?
Well, hey, we have late round quarterback JJ Zachariason here. So I went with a really late quarterback that I've been really eyeing here. And I'm going to give you the player, and then I'm going to give you some points. The player is Will Levis. His ADP right now is at 153. Now, I'm not telling you to go ahead and have him as your number one quarterback. In a 2 tight end or 2 quarterback league, absolutely. Go ahead and get him as your second quarterback. But in a 1 QB league, I would probably think around that, in that, ADP where he is, you already have a quarterback at that point. But him as your second quarterback, and to kind of feel and see what happens, it's not a bad idea. And here's the reason why. I love to take a look at the coaching changes that happen every offseason. This offseason, they took out Matt Vrabel, and now you have Brian Callahan that comes into this mix. And everybody, we all know the Callahan. You know the last name, Bill Callahan, one of the orchestrators of, I think, one of the best offensive lines. He's a genius when it comes to it. And we look at Tennessee last year, they were probably one of the worst, if not the worst offensive lines So I see a jump in that offensive line for this year. I'm not going to say they're going to be a top 10 or top 15, but there is going to be a jump. It may not happen right away, but there will be a jump. So I'm looking at a guy like Will Levis. They got Calvin Ridley to partner up with Nuke Hopkins. So DeAndre Hopkins now has his guy, his Robin, so to speak. And if you want to add Commissioner Gordon into the mix, let's go ahead and put Tyler Boyd there, because anytime you have a player that jumped ship from an organization that in the Cincinnati Bengals, who were just a few years away from a Super Bowl, and he goes to a playoff type team, and they didn't go to the playoffs last year, but they've been to the playoffs under Mark Vrabel. So anytime you go to a situation like that, that speaks volumes to me. That means that he believes in the offense, he believes in the coordinator, he believes that the coach, Brian Callahan, can get this team going. So I'm really high on that offense. I think that offense will get it going. The running backs are good pass catchers. Then you got Chickazam Nkonkwo. I like him as well as a pass catching tight end. He could be kind of one of those guys you've forgotten about, but Will Levis is my late round quarterback that I'm picking.
Mr. Zach, how do you feel about that? Are you okay with it?
Yeah, I love that call. Tennessee, I've been doing high volume best ball over on Underdog this offseason, and just drafting. I think I've drafted like 450 teams so far this offseason this summer.
Might work.
Yeah. Honestly, with children, it's like having a third child. Yeah, I mean, like the Titans are my heaviest rostered team right now because of their cost, right? I love Tajay Spears. I don't mind getting Tony Pollard as well. I think DeAndre Hopkins is massively undervalued right now. And all of it stems from what Tip's talking about with this Brian Callahan move, where we're going to not only see better offensive line play, probably, we're also going to see a pass heavier offense in general. I mean, we saw it throughout his time in Cincinnati. Even when Joe Burrow was out, Cincinnati was still pretty pass heavy. Even before Joe Burrow got there, Callahan was offensive coordinator for a year, and Cincinnati was a pass-heavy offense. And then you look at every single move that they've made this offseason: Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Tony Pollard a pass-catching back. They're making moves to surround Will Levis with talent, and they're going to be more than likely a pass-heavy team. And the intrigue with Levis is that the dude just pushes the ball. He could be a Jameis Winston type, right? In terms of just like the DGAF nature, chuck it down the field type attitude. Last year, he threw it 20 plus air yards on 22.4% of his throws. That was most in the NFL by over 8 percentage points. Like it wasn't even close. Jordan Love was in second. It wasn't even close. I mean, Will Levis just threw the ball down the field. Now you have a vertical threat in Calvin Ridley that you're adding. You got a nice underneath guy in Tyler Boyd. I could see Tennessee, being a fringe top 10 offense this year. And I think that where they're being drafted, that's being, it's being baked in if it does go, if they're more of like the 20th ranked offense. I mean, the where these guys' prices are, it's really, really easy to go after them.
So my fear with Will Levis, it kind of is one of your strength arguments, is his air yards and how he had a plethora of them. But the problem is while he had the most air yards in that category, he was one of the most inefficient and worst quarterbacks below 20 yards. He had zero ability to kind of drive the ball down the field. And if it wasn't for a big play, they didn't put up points. I mean, if you even look up his fantasy stat count, I mean, his first game where he just kind of walked in, he threw 4 touchdowns against the Falcons. Congratulations. And then after that, it was 9 fantasy points, 7, 12, 7, 11. And then, you know what? We can skip all the way to week 17, championship football. He put up negative 1.4. You trust him in your starting lineup?
I mean, I wouldn't right away. As Tip said, I don't think you have to go out and draft him. This is a situation of, obviously we're talking about late round guys. This is a situation of throwing that dart. If he's your QB2, if you have a deep enough bench, or if he's just sitting on your waiver wire and you're ready to pounce because you know that the ability is there, you go after, because we're really just looking at the ceiling outcomes here, right? We're looking at the high average at the targets, that hitting more consistently, him improving as a passer, going from, a mid-year rookie and stepping into that situation to a full-blown starter in a brand new system with much improved weapons. I think it's just a look at that and saying to yourself, What are the odds that Will Levis like pans out and is the next big thing? Probably not very high, right? I don't think that we should expect him to be like the next like Joe Burrow or something. But I do think that there's a chance though that we see when you combine his ADOT with the pass heavy nature of this offense. I do think that there's a chance that we see this become like a Jameis Winston type thing that we saw in Tampa Bay with Bruce Arians, where that wasn't a bad fantasy situation at all. It was a fantastic one. And he was at least like a high end QB2, low end QB1.
Let me just share a story real quick. In 2019, I had Carson Wentz as my number one quarterback. Don't ask me why. I just, for some reason, was really high on him. And then throughout the draft process, I was like, all right, I got to get another quarterback just in case it doesn't pan out. So Lamar Jackson didn't get drafted until like the 15th round that year in my league. This is my home league. And so I took Lamar Jackson. And after week 2, guess who my starting quarterback was for the foreseeable future and all the way till championship week when I won the Super Bowl in that league? It was Lamar Jackson. That's what I'm telling you guys. That's what I'm thinking. Will Levis, I'm not saying he's going to have an MVP season, but that's how I would treat him. I would, if you got yourself a solid quarterback, one that you're late, and Anthony Richardson. There we go. Anthony Richardson's a quarterback that there's really good upside, but if he gets banged up or injured again, or if he's just not panning out the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, you see Will Levis you can automatically put him in there and possibly maybe make a package to trade Anthony Richardson because he's going to figure it out unless there's some type of injury. But that's just something that I would recommend doing with that.
Yeah, for somebody for a team that has improved offensive line, gathered some weapons, kind of made them more multi-dimensional than just give Derrick Henry the ball, then yeah, I definitely have some more expectations for this football team, and especially in my fantasy football lineup. I like the pick in itself. Mr. JJ, you got one for me?
Yeah, let's go to Denver. Let's go to Jaleel McLaughlin. As a nice little dart. My favorite stat that I found this summer was when you look at all NFL team seasons since 2011 and you look at team running back target shares. So that's, the percentage of targets that the team's running backs are seeing, not just one individual running back. If you look at the top 17, Sean Payton led teams own 8 of the top 17 team running back target shares since 2011, which is completely insane. And it stems back to, some people will say, oh, that's because he had Alvin Kamara. Well, it goes back before Alvin Kamara in New Orleans. And then, yes, he used Kamara a lot in New Orleans. But last year with Javonte Williams, Samaje Perine, and Jaleel McLaughlin, we saw Denver target their running backs at the highest rate in football by far. And so now you enter this season, there's a little bit of ambiguity going on. There's a report that came out that Javonte Williams could be cut or Samaje or the last roster spot in Denver's running back room would come down to Samaje Perine and Javonte Williams. I don't really buy that. There's an out in Samaje Perine's contract where he could get out and they could cut him and it'd be fine. Javonte has one more year left in his rookie deal, so I think he's going to stick around. But regardless, they went out and they drafted Audric Estime, in April. Estime is not a pass catching back. He's an early down back. He's a bruiser. They've talked about him being a 2-down back. Jaleel McLaughlin is a natural pass catcher. If you look at him, Samaje Perine, and Javonte Williams last year, and basically any metric, Jaleel McLaughlin was more efficient than either one of those guys last season. Whether you're looking at like breakaway runs, 10 plus yard, 20 plus yard runs, rate of gaining positive yardage, yards per out run, Samaje Perine had a slightly better number, but basically most of these numbers favored Jaleel McLaughlin last year. And he saw as a rookie about an 8% target share per game, which is a really strong number for a rookie, let alone an undrafted rookie, let alone an undrafted rookie who didn't even get invited to the NFL Combine. This is a situation where, I don't see McLaughlin becoming like some stud because he's a smaller guy. He's probably not going to handle this massive workload. But if you look at what Denver's done, they have Cortland Sutton, who is good but not great. Like he's a solid X, but he's not a fantastic player per se, who's going to command like a 30% target share. And then they have Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin, who are question marks. And outside of that, there's Josh Reynolds, who they have now at wide receiver. I mean, there's a lot of question marks at wide receiver on that team. their tight end, Greg Dulcich, can't see. They're talking up Lucas Kroll right now, who half the fantasy industry probably doesn't even know exists. And they're going to probably, now they got Bo Nix, who will dump it off. I mean, we saw him do that in Oregon. So I think there's a good chance that Jaleel McLaughlin is a pass catching back for them, hits at least a 10% target share. And when you can hit a 10% target share as a late round back, those guys hit at a very, very, very strong rate. So I think Jaleel McLaughlin is a really, really solid pick right now.
So I really like that pick, but my biggest gripe is I don't know how to spell his name. So I kind of can't find him right now. Hold on. But I really do like him on a more serious note. I think he is going to be, I'm calling it. He's going to be the lead back. I think he's going to be one of those guys that ends up becoming a every week starter on your fantasy roster, whether that's in your RB2 to flex spot. I like him a lot. Tip, you got any input?
No, I mean, it's good. Jared Judy's gone, so there's more targets to go around. So
Ooh.
I like it. And then you also, the Dulcich call. The Dulcich, I am a little higher on Dulcich. As long as he can stay on the field. That's the problem, man. If the dude can stay on the field, but I mean, that's the thing. You have to be the best ability. We've heard it before, is availability. So, if you're not going to be on the field, that's the thing. And McLaughlin, I like it because Sean Payton will throw those screen passes. He will throw those screen passes all day, every day. And he's electric enough. He's fast. He's quick. He's got the hands to catch the ball. So I love it.
So right now, as I'm looking, Jaleel has an ADP of 156. I mean, obviously it's give or take depending on the format and all that stuff. But so if it's a 10-team league, that's about the 15th round, 12-team league, that's about the 13th round. I would draft him probably in the 11th round to make sure I snag him. Is that too much of a reach?
What's the positional rank with that in the 156 range or what have you?
RB 52.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, he's a value. I think he should at least be in the 40s.
Yeah. So exactly. So I would reach at least around to grab him, because would I rather around him right now, around Jaleel, is Adam Thielen. I'd rather have Jaleel.
Mm-hmm.
Derek Carr, rather have Jaleel. Tyler Algier. Yeah, I kind of don't mind Tyler Algier, but you know what? I think I'd rather have Jaleel. Tyler Conklin. Nah, give me Jaleel. Josh Downs. No, still rather have Jaleel. Like around him, there's not much more talent, and especially better talent that you would rather have on your roster, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have him at RB 45, so I'm well ahead of his ADP right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right. So I'm gonna throw out Michael Wilson here. Not because I really like him, but because I dislike Marvin Harrison Jr. I just don't trust him. I just don't think that Marvin Harrison Jr. is gonna have that. What is that? Early second round ADP production. I think teams are just going to be stacking on him because realistically it's him and Kyler Murray right now. And I think that's why Michael Wilson is going to have the standout year his sophomore campaign that he's going to have. And he's probably, in my opinion, going to be a much more valuable asset because last year he was averaging like a 20% target share.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was on a space yesterday on X and somebody brought him up, Michael Wilson, and I didn't hate it because Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., they are going to command a lot of attention. And, James Conner or even Trey Benson coming out of the backfield, Kyler Murray with his legs. This offense is not a one-dimensional offense. It's going to be something that, can definitely happen. So I'm sorry, JJ, go ahead.
No, I mean, I like Michael Wilson for sure. I also wouldn't count out Greg Dortch in that offense out of the slot. I think they're going to use him more finally in that role because Rondale Moore's gone. And they like Dortch has been pretty solid when he's gotten, called upon. But I do like some people are hype on like Zay Jones, who's there now. But Michael Wilson, at least, I have a prospect model that I developed for prospects entering the NFL. And then I have what's called a year 2 model that looks at players after year 1 and projects how well they're going to perform in year 2 and year 3 in their NFL careers. And Michael Wilson's score was solid. Like it was in a range, his year 2 score, which is based on his prospect score combined with how these guys performed in year 1. But his year 2 score was at least like a it was like around where Dontavian Wicks is at, right? Like in that range. I just subjectively like Wicks a little bit more, in his career outlook and such. But yeah, I mean, I think Wilson's a good call out. He's someone that I've at least gotten in like Kyler Murray stacks and stuff a lot throughout the offseason, playing best ball.
Mm-hmm. So right now, the list I'm going for, Wicks ADP is about 163. I'm actually really surprised it's that low. I expected him to be going in like the 9th to 8th round.
Yeah.
For some odd reason. Interesting in my opinion. Julian McLaughlin, like we just mentioned earlier, he's 157, and then Michael Wilson is 156. So they're all going to be going around at the same time, depending on how willing you're to reach, how willingly you are able to reach them. So right now, real fast, just because they all actually have the same ADP-ish. Will Levis is 153, and we have 3. Mr. JJ, would you rank the 3 that you would rather have?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on team need and such, and how the early rounds go. If I go running back heavy, I'll probably just want more wide receivers on my team. If I go wide receiver heavy, which is what I generally do, then I'm going to throw more darts at late round running backs, right? So I'll say that I'd split it between a McLaughlin and Wicks. I do like Wicks though more than Wilson, and I know, I guess I can talk about Wicks really quick. I know that like, people don't see the volume potential with him because they have these 4 wide receivers there. They have capable tight ends. They add Josh Jacobs. They draft Marshawn Lloyd. They have pieces in that offense. But I would say to that is there's still an opportunity for talent to emerge, right? Like I think Jaden Reed is the most talented wide receiver on that team, but obviously you're going to have to get him in some, in best ball, he's going in like the 5th round, but he'll probably go later in like home leagues and stuff. So, I do think Jaden Reed's the most talented, but Dontavian Wicks last year hit a yards per route run rate above 2, which is a number that's only been hit when you include last year, 5 rookie wide receivers hit it, but that's a number that is usually a lot lower than that. But since 2011, there's been only 26 rookie wide receivers that have gotten to that number. And of those 26, I mean, a lot of them were stronger prospects coming out than Dontavian Wicks was, but a lot of them really, really performed well year 2, year 3, et cetera, moving forward throughout their career. And so I think that you sort of layer on this talent profile of Wicks, the fact that he saw more work as the season went on last year. Christian Watson can't stay healthy. I don't think Romeo Doubs is necessarily like a special talent. I think he's solid, but I don't know if he's like, got to get him on the field, got to have him on the field. And so, I think the most likely outcome is a rotation of sorts, right? Like if you were to sit here and tell me who projects better, Michael Wilson or Dontavian Wicks, Michael Wilson might project better in terms of just like a season-long projection, right? But I'm looking at variance in the late rounds, and I want to find guys that have these like crazy floor-ceiling combos, and that ceiling I think is just higher for a guy like Wicks.
Yeah, that I'm not going to disagree with. Realistically, I didn't even think about Wicks because I assumed he was just going much earlier than that. I did not know he was going that late. And something specifically about Wicks is how easy his schedule looks right now. As I'm looking at, his most difficult opponent is week 9 against the Rams. And that's not even that serious. Now, Aaron Donald's gone. No Jalen Ramsey. He has such an easy schedule throughout the year. Shoot, hold on. I got to update my ADP rankings right now. Okay, real quick. Tip, do you have any closing statements on Wicks before we go on to more players?
No, I mean, it's one of those situations for me with Green Bay. If these guys all stay healthy, it's just going to be something really hard to predict. And it's even going to be hard to predict the health because Christian Watson has not been healthy at all any of the seasons that he's played. Romeo Doubs has been banged up, but I think that it comes to trust with Jordan Love, and I know that he trusts Romeo Doubs. You can see that was evident of last year's postseason. I think Romeo had 12 targets amongst those 2 games. That's not a lot of targets when you look at it. It's like 6 per game, but it's the trust value. It's like who does he trust more? And I've got to tell you, if Christian Watson continues with his injuries, Wicks could be the guy that takes his place for sure. Because Reed, to me, Jaden Reed is just in a different. He's a weapon. He's a guy that they're always going to want the ball in his hand. So I like it. I like the call, especially at the ADP. Yeah, I love that call.
There we go. Mr. JJ, you got another player for me?
Sure. Let's go with a rookie running back. Let's go with Kamani Vidal. I'm pretty bullish on him because I liked him as a prospect more than most coming out of Troy. He's a smaller back. He's only like 5'7", 5'7.5". So he's definitely not big, or he might be pushing 5'8", but one of his comps. So I have statistical comps in my model, and one of them was actually DeAndre Swift. Like he has a little Swift to his game where he can play. He can carry the ball, sure, but I think that where he can win in the NFL is as a receiving back and as a receiver. And one of the things he does really well is pass protect, right? So you look at him in this situation in LA, you look at his competition, you got J.K. Dobbins coming off a torn Achilles. You have Gus Edwards, who's 29 years old and has never had more than 13 targets in a season throughout his career. I do think Edwards is probably going to be the goal line guy, but if I get beat by a guy like Dobbins who beats the odds and does something coming off an Achilles, then so be it. Like I think at the end of the day, Vidal, I wouldn't be shocked at all if he in PPR formats especially just ends up being the highest scoring Chargers running back this year. With Edwards is not like a special talent. Dobbins again coming off that injury, and this will probably be a pretty run heavy offense. I don't know if that necessarily favors Vidal because we want some of those cheap looks through the air for a guy like that and a guy of his archetype. But yeah, I mean, I'm just surprised that he's not getting. I know that he's getting love, and I know there's sort of a hype train going on with him. But if you look at ADP, especially I was looking at like Fantasy Pros ADP and such. I mean, he's buried over there. Like he's not getting any love at all. You can get him in the last round of your home league probably. Whereas I think that he's a very, very solid pick.
Mr. Tip, I don't have too much information on Vidal to give you an accurate statement, but how about you? Do you got something more for me?
Yeah, you know what? He has grown on me every week because I got to hear from Greg Kellogg, Kamani Vidal, for Kamani. And so now I'm on the Kamani Vidal train. I am all on it because just what JJ said, you got a guy in Gus Edwards who he'll get you touchdowns. If you need 1 yard, don't just give it to Gus because Gus, that's his nickname is the Bus. So he's gonna get you that 1 yard. J.K. Dobbins, that was an interesting pickup. I understand Greg Roman's over there. He's got ties to him, but he's just constantly injured every single year. So that's something in training camp and in the preseason I am going to be looking out for him. But yeah, the Kamani Vidal is a smash hit for me because he could by mid to late part of the season be the guy. Just off the strength of Gus Edwards just getting you those 1 yard, when you need it the most type plays, and Kamani Vidal getting the pass catches. So I love it, man. I think that he's a guy who could. I'm not going to say league winner. I don't like to say that, all the time. But I will say he's a guy who could, do some damage on your team and the other teams.
Running the football in is probably so. Shoot, I don't want to phrase it as touchdown or bust, but I feel like Gus Edwards is a touchdown or bust type of player to the point where he's not necessarily relevant. I don't want to say irrelevant, but he's difficult to draft and justify it, in my opinion. I'd rather wait and then go for the higher upside player in Vidal. Is that an accurate statement?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I haven't drafted a ton of Edwards because I don't take running backs who don't catch passes. It's just unless your name's Derrick Henry, it's a very, very tough thing to beat. Even in standard formats, people don't realize that in standard where you're not getting a point per reception, a target is still more worth more than a rush attempt is. So yeah, you should be looking for running backs that can catch passes.
All right, Tip. Who else you got for us?
So we've talked a lot about players that you can draft in these later rounds. I'm going to talk about a player that is going almost undrafted in a 12-team league, and that's A.T. Perry from the Saints. I've been following this kid ever since he was with the Wake Forest. I liked what he showed on tape. He's like 6'3", almost 6'4", 210. He fits the mold of a Michael Thomas, and if you guys know, Michael Thomas is no longer there. And another person that's no longer there is Pete Carmichael. They got rid of him in this offseason, and they bring in Clint Kubiak. And Clint Kubiak is the son of Greg Kubiak. I know I'm talking about a lot of coaches, but I think that is so important in fantasy football. Looking at the philosophies, looking at the changes that can be made. And JJ brought up Cortland Sutton, what he did last year. He had a career year last year. And I'm not here to say that A.T. Perry is going to have a year like Cortland Sutton because you still got Chris Olave, you still got the burner and Rashid Shaheed, one of my favorite names to say in the league. And, you still got Alvin Kamara there. But there could be a case where A.T. Perry finds himself in that starting lineup. And if you're opposite Chris Olave, who demands a lot of attention, then he could find himself in one of those scenarios where he could have some really good weeks. And another thing, too, that I really like about him is that he has really good red zone skills. He has a really great catch radius that a lot of people are talking about out there in New Orleans and some of the film that I've watched. So he could be one of those guys that could get some touchdowns for you. I mean, touchdowns are fluky, but he could be one of those guys that get you the touchdowns. And I know they got Juwan Johnson there too. It's another guy who could be getting some touchdown looks in the red zone. But I think that there's a chemistry being built over there.
Yeah, in the last, I believe it is at 9 games, he had 4 touchdown receptions. So that's definitely something to look forward towards a guy. Now, his ADP is 259. Is this somebody you're taking in the are you using a draft pick on him?
round?
I'll tell you what. If my team is all solidified and set, I will take the very last pick on him because you can do that. Hell, you could probably really get him after the fact because sometimes, especially if you're doing an online draft, you might snooze or you might miss it, and you might get that second kicker, and you could throw that kicker away and get somebody like an A.T. Perry in there. So yeah, I personally, if I'm at a live draft, I think I've gotten him. I did the Scott Fish Bowl live, and I got him in like the 18th round. It was something crazy. I was just like, let me take a flyer on him as my 7th wide receiver. So that's just something that you could do with him.
Sir JJ, how do you feel about him?
I like the call because I too think that the Kubiak storyline has kind of been underserved in the fantasy space. Like not enough people are talking about it. I mean, he's coming off of a season where he was the passing game coordinator in San Francisco, and that's a team that Brock Purdy was an MVP candidate throughout the season. Super, super efficient. They're going to get a lot. So New Orleans barely ran any motion last year. Like they did not get creative whatsoever. It was a horrific offense, right? That's going to be the complete opposite with Clint Kubiak. They're going to get guys in motion, scheme guys open. That's why I think we should be high on Rashid Shaheed too, just in general, because he's a obvious deep threat, but I think that he can do a lot with the ball in his hands too. And then, Chris Olave is Chris Olave. But yeah, I mean, I think the offense in general is a little bit undervalued just because of that coordinator change and what that could do. And we've seen Derek Carr have some spiked weeks with yardage and being able to air it out a little bit. Like, I don't think he's a special quarterback, but he's at least someone who we know can help elevate and sustain, fantasy production out of the pass catchers.
I do like that pick. If I see him and I feel like, I could take a wide receiver right now, I'll probably say screw it and snag him. That or a kicker. I might ignore a kicker this year just to snag another wide receiver just to see how it goes in the preseason and regular season. But right now, I hate tight ends. Can't stand them. I think the tight end position should be eliminated in fantasy football and just replaced with a second flex. I don't think anybody would miss it, in my personal opinion. I think maybe some old heads might go, oh, no, it's a position. Nobody cares. But until that happens, Pat Freiermuth, I think he is going to be a good tight end because everybody's favorite word, vacated targets. And with Deontay Johnson gone and Allen Robinson gone, I think it was like 140 potential targets to have. And while I hate using that as an example, when you're the tight end for a team, congratulations, you need whatever type of upside that could bring to you. And especially right now, it's either you have an elite tight end or you don't have an elite tight end. Everyone's kind of looking for an every week streamer. I think Pat Freiermuth could be exactly that guy.
Yeah, I really like Freiermuth this year. People are worried about him because Arthur Smith, now offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh, after his stint in Atlanta being a disaster with Kyle Pitts and the misuse of Kyle Pitts. But here's something crazy with Arthur Smith's offense. So he's been a coordinator or head coach since 2019 in the NFL. So you had 2019 through 2023. His teams have ranked 8th, 4th, and 1st in tight end target share. Like he uses tight ends in his offense. Sure, personnel dictates that to some degree, but look at the Pittsburgh offense right now. Tell me who is going to be the second number 2 target getter. Maybe it's Jalen Warren, maybe if things break his way, but realistically it's Roman Wilson, but realistically it's probably going to be Pat Freiermuth. Like even if it's a run heavy offense, I think that he could, inch closer to and get close to 100 targets this year.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting because you have Arthur Smith who utilizes his tight ends. Look at what he did with Jonnu Smith. He made Jonnu Smith irrelevant again in certain games. And now you have a guy in Russell Wilson who doesn't really utilize the tight ends position as much as some other quarterbacks do. So it's going to be really interesting. But I think that Russell Wilson wants to keep his job. I think that Arthur Smith wants to keep his job. And I think they both want to make Tomlin happy. So you don't want to be in Tomlin's, even though he's a very loyal guy from what it seems like, he does seem like a guy who, you don't want to take him off. So I think that it's going to be beautiful for Pat Freiermuth. I think that, again, JJ said it great. You said it great, Nader. So as far as the targets have been vacated. So who else is going to get? Rome Wilson, I think, is a dog. I think he'll be great in this offense. And they do a really good job with cycling out wide receivers in Pittsburgh. And I think he's going to do a good job too. But Pat Freiermuth is going to be the guy that I think, especially in the red zone, they're going to be looking to him quite a bit. I love it.
Now, a lot of people might be talking about Darnell Washington being drafted in the 3rd round last year, but I also want to remind people that he was pass blocking or run blocking, I should say, either or, in I think it was 75% of snaps.
Yeah, he's a blocker.
Yeah, he's a blocking tight end.
He's a monster. Yeah,
he's big dude. Big. Some might say girthy.
Yeah,
but he a big dude.
Yeah, at least thick.
He thick,
please.
A couple C's. All right, so let's go one more around the horn, and then we'll call it an episode. Yeah. Mr. Tip.
For me, since you hate tight ends so much, Nader, I'm going to go with a tight end. It's Isaiah Likely, man. I think his ADP is at 179 right now. Look, Todd Monken offense. This is the 2nd year of the Todd Monken offense. It wasn't a bad offense, except for the AFC Championship game when they just completely abandoned the run and only had 7 carries, which was crazy. I think they tried to get a little cute. But as far as Isaiah Likely, look, they're going to run at 12 personnel. A lot of teams are going to that nowadays. Look at what Buffalo's doing. Look at what, we just talked about Pittsburgh. They might run out some 12 personnel. So I'm really liking this. I think that it's going to help Lamar Jackson. There's no more Odell Beckham Jr. I know that wasn't a big thing last year, but hey, he's still a body that's no longer there. So I like Isaiah Likely. Mark Andrews is getting older. He's been banged up. He was banged up last year until the playoffs. So I like Isaiah Likely a lot. I think he did a good job being in that offense. He's not a real big threat to get like a bunch of receptions, but he'll pop off for some really nice plays here and there. I like Rashad Bateman, but he's been an issue with health as well. So I think who are some other pass catchers out there? You have Zay Flowers, but I really think Isaiah Likely could come into his own with this Todd Monken offense.
I refuse to talk about Rashad Bateman. I think he's just trash. But Isaiah Likely, on the other hand, I think it's a little odd and an interesting conversation to kind of have a tight end as a handcuff. Yeah. But I think, if I had one, it would be Isaiah Likely. I don't think there's any other tight end in the league where you'd be like, oh, you know what? I'll have one as a handcuff in a way. Mr. JJ?
Yeah, I think Likely's a solid pick. At the very least, he is a handcuff to Mark Andrews, and if he gets called upon, he'll probably be a tight end 1, or at least like a lower end tight end 1. So you have that upside, but I think there's some standalone value, as Tip is saying, just based on the fact that they don't have many other weapons. You could run 12 personnel with that offense. So yeah, I think it makes sense.
There we go. All right. So I don't have too many thoughts or complaints about Isaiah Likely. Mostly just my biggest thing would be, okay, could I afford a roster spot for him? That would probably be the biggest question I could have. It's like, okay, how did I construct my roster? Okay, could I afford to have a second tight end? And then would I rather have another player instead? That'd be my only concern. Be like, okay, you know what? Dante Wicks is about 10 ADP spots ahead of him. Would I rather have somebody like Wicks, or would I rather have somebody like Tyler Algier? Would I rather have somebody like Xavier Leggett? Stuff like that would probably be the biggest critique I have with drafting a handcuff tight end. But other than that, I think Likely would be a solid option. Mr. JJ, give us one more.
I'll go with another rookie running back. Let's go with I think he's deeper than Kamani Vidal. At least he is like on Underdog and stuff. But Tyrone Tracy out of New York. So he again, I do a lot of prospecting work. And he's someone who he played in college for 6 years. So that's a red flag. That's never good whenever a guy plays for school in school that long. Yeah. But he was a wide receiver converted to running back. He transferred to Purdue and played running back. And so he has this pass catching skill set, and then he also can play a little back, and that's what they drafted him as a running back. But if you look at this backfield, you got Devin Singletary and Eric Gray is the other running back that's sort of competing for touches there. Both of those guys are not explosive. Neither one of them had speed scores above 90. That's weight adjusted 40 times. 90 is not a good score. Like 90 is like a 15th percentile speed score. Tyrone Tracy was at 104. He was a nice weight adjusted speed. Has a lot of explosiveness. He was someone who actually, in my prospect model, comped pretty favorably to Tony Pollard. Pollard, another guy in college who kind of played a hybrid role, very similar size backs between the two. So I think that what we could see with Tyrone Tracy is that he steps in and is kind of a change of pace back to start. And then what if he shows off? What if he shows off his explosiveness? Things at least could be pass catcher for them, right? And then all of a sudden he just climbs the depth chart and he might just be better than what they have in Devin Singletary. And the other thing is that the Giants more than likely will not be competitive this year. And so they might want to just see what they have in a player like Tracy down the stretch when there's no really need to give the ball to Devin Singletary a lot. So I think that he could peak at the right time also. And we generally see rookies do better during the second half of the year versus the first. So that's just a dart throw. I think it's a reasonable dart throw. And he could get some production even right away as a pass catching back for the Giants.
If Devin Singletary is your competition, there is no competition. And if as a running back, you cannot over jump Devin Singletary, then maybe the NFL just isn't for you. But Tip, give us a closing statement.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a great show, man. I really appreciate JJ Zachariason for coming on, man. I know you're a busy guy. Of course. This is awesome. Nader, you killed it, man. You great host. I love the correlation you had with all of the you find a fry at the bottom of the those are
the best. Tell me they're not the best.
I like all those little correlations. Those are cool, man. But yeah, no, we really appreciate you being on this 32-bit. Question. You guys going to the expo?
I'll be there.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
There's an expo.
Sweet, I'll see you there.
Yeah, definitely, man. It'll be really cool to chop it up with you guys.
Yeah.
Hope to see you guys there at the expo as well. But other than that, man, I don't really have anything else. This has been a great show. We're talking about late round gyms. Please follow everybody that's on there. Please follow JJ Zachariason. Follow my guy Nader. Nader, I don't know what your ad is on Twitter, but I'm pretty sure.
You don't want to know what my ad is on Twitter.
You don't want to know
I do too much trolling. I don't need people to know what I'm doing on there.
And you can find me at Tippmajor. Guys, I really appreciate you all showing up, and shout out to 32-bit, man. This has been awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate putting you on the spot. You handled it like a champ. I thought it'd be funny, so I did it. But hey, remember, guys, good luck.
I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready for all today. New